Everybody, it's Tim. It's good to be back with you again today as we continue our journey through the Bible, one chapter at a time, one day at a time. Our reading for today was in Exodus chapters 14, 15, and 16. We can see in these chapters that the Israelites had crossed the Red Sea, defeated the Egyptian army, and now they're making their way through Saudi Arabia, what is Saudi Arabia today. God provides them with water when they're thirsty, chapter 15. And then chapter 16, they get to the place where they're hungry, they're out of food, and God provides them with a unique way of providing food for them that will last until they cross the Jordan River many years in the future. But you may remember from chapter 16, there's more going on here than just God feeding hungry people while they're there in the desert. This was also meant to be a teaching experience because they were going to receive the law coming up in just a few chapters when they arrive at Mount Sinai. But before they receive the law, God wants to teach them something about obeying his commands. And he uses the Sabbath principle as his first test case because when he said, I'm going to give you manna, you'll receive it every day. A miracle is going to provide the food that you need. There were just a few simple rules. Okay, rule number one, you only gather what manna you need for the day. Don't have anything left over or else it's going to spoil. Well, of course, some did, and it did. And the second rule was on the sixth day, you can gather twice as much because there's not going to be any on the seventh day. And so, yeah, you can do that. You can also fast on the seventh day if you choose to do that. Those are the two rules. He was teaching them about the Sabbath by doing that. Now, the Sabbath, of course, was a principle that was started back in Genesis chapter 2 at creation when God created everything. He rested on the seventh day. He did that as an example for all of us today. And that's the way he intended life to work on the planet that he had created. And so that's what he's doing in chapter 16. Um, the Sabbath, by the way, in Hebrew, Shabbat, means to stop or cease. It has nothing to do with Saturday. It just means to stop what you normally are doing. So your work ends for one day, seventh day, one day out of every week. And of course, you may be wondering, okay, we're just talking about going out in the morning and gathering food and bringing it in for the rest of the day. So in terms of work, there's not a lot of work involved in that. But even in that little bit, resting on the seventh day was to teach them what God had in mind for the Sabbath. Now, Christians struggle with this today. I don't know how many times I've heard preachers say that, when God gave us the Ten Commandments, he expects us to obey them, except for the commandment about the Sabbath day. I think they misunderstand what that commandment is really all about, like a lot of people do. In the Gospels, we see Jesus time after time confronted by the Pharisees about keeping the Sabbath day. He would heal somebody, and they would say, "You can't do that. This is the Sabbath day." Or his disciples were snacking on a handful of grain that they had plucked on the Sabbath day. There, the Pharisees were right there jumping up and down. They're working on Saturday. You can't do that. Well, they had a whole list of things that you are allowed to do and a list of rules that say what you're not allowed to do on the Sabbath day. That was their idea of what it meant to keep the Sabbath. And I think a lot of people look at the Sabbath day that way today. And also many people look at it as we're talking about Saturday. It has nothing to do with Saturday. There were Sabbath years where they would stop and they would rest. Every feast day was a Sabbath day. The Passover, for example, it doesn't matter what day of the week it was on. It was a Sabbath day. But what God was doing by giving this is providing his people with a special gift. When Jesus was confronted with that, he told them, "You don't understand." He said, "Man was not made for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for man." It was a gift where you stop and rest. what's going on a true Sabbath? Well, for one thing, by taking time off work, you're acknowledging your true priorities. Now, work is a gift from God. It's necessary. That's how we provide for ourselves and for our families with the work that we do. It's important. But one day a week, you set aside your work. You're acknowledging that work is not to be the center of our lives. God is to be at the very center of our lives. And there's one day when we can make that literally true. It was also meant to be a picture of salvation. We don't work for our salvation. It's a gift from God. And just like Moses told the Israelites while they were there by the Red Sea, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Well, that's how we're saved today. And that was taught in Hebrews chapter 4. There remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God, even today. And it was also looking forward to that day. Well, there's a lot more I could say about it, but I want to keep this brief. But think about that and maybe consider um, the idea of a Sabbath rest, the principle, and how you can incorporate that into your own life and have one day just to focus on God and a day of rest as you prepare for the week to come. Consider that, will you? Well, I'll be back with you tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. Our reading for tomorrow is also going to be in Exodus chapter 17, 18, and 19. Be reading that, and then we'll think about it when we get together then. See you soon.